because I first started following American politics the year I turned 20, which is 1980. And certainly later than the election of 88, I don't know if you remember that, like Bush Sr. and Dukakis.
I do, actually. I was a teenager, but I was watching C-SPAN back in the 1980s, so I was there with you, a bit younger, but I was there.
It was hideous, and it was so empty, and the debates were such a farce, and they've remained a farce ever since. They've gotten worse.
I remember being, it was a little bit later, I think it was in 92, but I remember being taken aback, from my perspective as a particular, and fussy young person, that George W. Bush and Bill Clinton were deigning to go on Good Morning America and hashing out their views. I thought that was just unpresidential, and I suppose in a way it put. I mean, it was a product of the fact that there was a media and money intensive environment that caused that to be a possibility. It was a very minor, outcropping of that, but it certainly wouldn't have happened in an era in which the system was so thoroughly saturated by cash.
I would like to, obviously one more thing, and then I kind of want to maybe pivot to, if possible, to the reasons why I'm quite confident that we're going to win this fight.
Right, and I want to hear specifically, because it sounds like you have had some real positive strides, and there are places where this could become a reality. And I don't want to get so caught up in the negativity that we forget that, because there are real people on the ground trying to put this into place, and I want to figure out where we can happen. But finish your thought on this, and then we can.
Well, but to set that, I guess that which also kind of sets that up is that I think what has happened to the American people, we Americans have never lost our love of freedom, and we have never lost. You hear in elite commentary more and more these days a distrust of the people, and a kind of a claim that all these bad things happening in our politics, the polarization and this and that the fault is with the people. And that's just total bunk. The fault's with the elites, and the fault is with money. But the reason that our freedom has been stolen from us is that it was so gradual, and also that it was done by this unseeable process of money censoring ideas and candidates.
Right.
And there was never a dramatic moment where we could say to ourselves, holy cow, our freedom has been stolen from us. Now we must take it back. But in a way, that moment has come, because I think that the one reason why I really feel so confident that we're going to win this fight, and maybe only in 5 years' time or thereabouts, is that things had to get this bad in the country before it was possible for just to get almost everyone to see this is broken, it's not working, we got to change it. And the American people, people in Washington think that we're stupid, but we're not, because the voters have been saying on both sides of the aisle for years, this isn't working. We keep giving support to candidates like Obama, Sanders, and Trump, and Elizabeth Warren, who promise systemic change, but with no details. And voter-owned elections, I think, is the missing plan for change that was never there all along. And it's a thing that can rally people. And so concretely, I guess as far as it's gaining steam around the country, it's, as they say, it's been used in Seattle for city elections since 2017, used, I think, quite successfully, passed by ballot initiative in Oakland, California last fall.
Great.
Won't be implemented till 2026. There are other state and local efforts underway. There's a strong effort in Minnesota. And I'm working especially with a group in New Hampshire, Open Democracy, a very strong grassroots group that has been there for a long time. And we're working to build support among New Hampshire voters. In part, we have allies in the state Senate on both sides of the aisle who will introduce a bill for a voter-owned election system for 5 of the most expensive races in New Hampshire. That is the 5 seats on the Executive Council, which approves all government contracts. And we're going to start there. And we're also just building bipartisan support in New Hampshire for voter-owned elections at the federal level. And the exciting play here is that because every 4 years, the eyes of the nation are on New Hampshire. What's news in New Hampshire is news nationally.
Right.
We get enough New Hampshire voters to tell candidates, starting, say, in mid-2027, I'm tired of my government being for sale, and I want my country back, and I want voter-owned elections. Then candidates can't run away from it. National media have to talk about it. And thus we can leverage really a small number of voters in New Hampshire to force this issue onto the national agenda in a presidential year. And suddenly we've elevated it to a degree. And fundamentally, we think that, and it's in our experience, my experience and their experience bears this out, the idea itself is inherently attracted to people in so many ways because, it's a soundbite, make the voters the donors. It's common sense. Whoever pays the piper calls the tune. If you want to call the tune in Washington, well, we're going to have to pay the piper. Also because, I think you've noticed this too, Beowulf, so many Americans feel so powerless and even defeated by the political system. And this, I love so much about this idea, what's kind of subversive about it almost, is that it directly empowers each voter. It literally puts the coin of political influence into the hands of each registered voter. And here's your allotment of power. You use it as you see fit. And candidates come to you to ask you not just for your vote, but for something they need a lot more badly, namely the cash.
Yeah.
And I think finally, the best of all, that we're finding that this is a step that Republicans and Democrats can take together. Because I think
that's important.
We're not gonna get systemic change without bipartisan buy-in. And we're seeing it. And I've seen it in almost 50 media interviews on outlets across the spectrum. Open Democracy has done grassroots work about money in politics for years, and also in deep red parts of the state, getting a positive response. And we commissioned a rather expensive for me, poll done by a top-notch polling firm in late June of 700 New Hampshire residents. It was a representative sample of 500 plus an oversample of 200 Republicans, asking about, first, what do you think about the state of money in American politics? And they're just all horrified,
Right.
Discontent north of 90% across the board. And then it was so interesting. We asked them an open-ended question, what bothers you most? And by far the strongest response, the most common response, was some variation on the parties won't work together, too much partisan anger. And we asked them about, a series of questions, like 5 things about money in politics. And, how do you feel about things, what bothers you? And people were very upset by dark money. So we know that is an important issue to lead with. We also saw that people are really get it, that we pay twice as much for prescription medicines as everyone else because, pharma's got Congress in his pocket.
Every time someone goes to the pharmacy, they understand that something is off when they just see in the news, hey, this costs half as much or a third as much in Canada or Mexico. Somebody is getting that extra money, and it's not going to a good cause, and I can barely afford my rent. So why the heck is this happening? Yeah,
and it's great to be able to draw that straight line. And I guess a final point, and this is, I guess, one point I want to get at, is that, I have been leaning more and more, this came out of my media interviews, into the idea, the recognition that this reform can be a unifying issue that helps to bring Americans together and at least dial back enough of the anger so that we can work together. And partly this is because I think the money is doing a lot to drive the anger. I think there's a divide and conquer politics that big money plays, but also because we can say to voters, and we are saying to voters and getting a positive response, no matter how we disagree on other issues, most of us agree this isn't working. We don't like politics as usual. We want our country back. And finally, a very resonant theme, and I was so heartened by this because it's really what motivates me personally, is that, our country, this is a special country. It's the only country on earth that really is defined by ideals, that stands for ideals, one of which is government by the people. And we asked this one question on the survey in two slightly different wordings, a split sample, but it's the same idea. Basically, United States stands for governed by the people. This money-driven politics makes a mockery of that ideal. It's un-American. It's unpatriotic. Yeah. And basically, we got about 90% agreement across the board politically. So we're kind of seeing that as one of the ways, part of the messaging that we can lead with to use this. Because I'll tell you, yes, it's true. If Americans do respond to negative messaging from candidates, because that's the only kind of messaging we're getting more and more. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that many Americans who really like this. And I talk to so many people across the board politically who just say, why can't we just treat each other decently? Why can't Americans, treat each other with respect? I don't want this anger. And I think that I'm sorry.
No, regardless of political party, we all want the same basic things. We all want to live, decent lives, and we want to have the basics that we need to get by. And I think there are a lot of people pouring a lot of resources into trying to get us to forget that and get us to focus on, like, whether we're in a red state or a blue state, which isn't to say that should be completely ignored, but overwhelmingly, we have things in common and we want certain things done. Let's focus on that. And the way to get there is by eliminating the barriers. And in this case, money is just a huge barrier. And the way that you structure this puts the power back into the hands of the people. And I'm so glad to hear that you are finding success, and I hope you find success in other areas around the country and make progress with this. I think New Hampshire is a great place to start. I hope you can get together with people in Oregon, because I think this sort of a place is ripe for that too, and maybe in some of the places where ranked choice voting as a concept has come to the fore, in like Maine and Alaska, because I think people really are open to innovative ideas, and if we can sort of put our foot in the door here, then it can spread. It can become a bigger idea.
Yeah, I guess I have to say, Beowulf, I feel like the American people are ready for change, and we've been ready for change for a long time. We've been saying it for a long time. The constituency for transformative change is already there, and we just need the catalyst, the spark. And, there's all kinds of great reforms out there. I've been settling on this reform because I think that because the money effectively blocks every single good idea for improving the country, and including, no matter where you are politically. I mean, if your big issue is wasteful government spending, well, so much of that wasteful government spending comes from lobbyists and, Pentagon contracts we don't need. Or if your issue is climate change or healthcare, which is an issue for everyone, none of us are going to get what we want as long as the need to please donors is going to block all action. So if we can make this happen, then we get immediate payoff across the board. And that could, once Americans see, look, we're not defeated. We actually can fight back. Because the thing is, yes, right now, Americans are 3/4 of us say the country's on the wrong track, and we are pessimistic. But you look at us historically, pessimism is not the default setting of the American people. It's really quite uncharacteristic of us historically. And
money is at the root of this. And if we can get at that, so many other things will be unlocked. I mean, I understand there are so many different areas that are necessary for reform, but I think until we unlock the financial influence part of this, it's going to be difficult to approach any of those because reform is blocked in so many different ways by money. The reality is bent around that, and once that influence recedes or comes into the hands of the people, and it becomes less of a problem, then we can proceed to those other areas of reform which are so important. But I think you're right. This has to be dealt with first.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Beowulf. And that's kind of what I feel is just let's, if we can all just notch a win for ourselves as a people, then suddenly we